This is NTD Evening News. Live from our NTD Global Headquarters in New York City, here is Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Former President Trump in court for another day of testimony, the judge denying his request for a mistrial after Stormy Daniels took the stand. The defense says her testimony was different from the story she told in 2016. Our legal correspondent Arlene Richards has more.
A key witness for the prosecution takes the stand on Tuesday. Stormy Daniels, also known as Stephanie Clifford, is the former adult film actress who says she had an affair with former President Trump. But her testimony about the affair, says the defense, is different from the 2016 story Trump is accused of buying. After the lunch break, Trump's attorneys asked for a mistrial, which the judge denied. The defense said she testified today about consent, about danger, and that's not the story she was peddling. The defense also said Daniels' testimony was highly prejudicial because it had nothing to do with the charges. Her testimony helps the prosecution show Trump had a desire to keep her quiet before the 2016 election. The prosecution said the story was not new. Prosecutor Susan Hoffinger saying, "At the end of the day, Your Honor, this is what the defendant was trying to hide in terms of the payoff in 2016 before the election." Judge Juan Merchan ultimately denied the call for a mistrial, acknowledging the testimony had problems, saying, "As a threshold matter, I agree, Mr. Blanche, that there were some things that probably would have been better left unsaid," but then admonishing the defense for not objecting enough. Daniels recounted how she first met Trump and said he later asked her out to dinner. The alleged affair, she says, happened after the dinner in Trump's penthouse suite at a hotel. Daniels began to provide intimate details of the encounter, but she stopped after the defense objected. She says she kept in touch with Trump afterwards because she wanted to get on his TV program, The Apprentice. As for that $130,000 hush money payment, Daniels testified that her publicist told her they should sell the story about the affair when she found out Trump was running for president. According to Daniels, she didn't care about the money at first. She just wanted to get the story out. But then she had a change of heart. On cross-examination, the defense questioned Daniels about tweets she posted about Trump going to jail and a defamation case she filed against Trump that was dismissed. Daniels' demeanor changed from relaxed to tense after the defense started questioning her. She testified that she hated Trump and that she wanted him to be held accountable, including going to jail if he is found guilty. Reporting from the criminal courthouse in Manhattan, Arlene Richards.
There is also a major update at Trump's Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. Judge Eileen Cannon is postponing the May 20th trial date and hasn't set a new date yet. The suspension comes after special counsel Jack Smith's office admitted in a court filing that some documents are not in the same order they were in when they were seized in the Mar-a-Lago raid. Trump's attorneys then requested a delay, saying Smith's team had, quote, failed to preserve critical evidence. Their letter reads, "Your failure to disclose the spoliation of this evidence until this month is an extraordinary breach of your constitutional and ethical obligations." The judge has not yet set a new trial date, and the case may not come to trial before the November election. Israel Defense Forces have started the long-awaited ground operations in Rafah in the Gaza Strip. The Israel military reported taking control of the Gaza side of the Rafah border crossing, where aid normally enters the Gaza Strip. The IDF said it had intelligence that the area was being used for terrorist activity. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
Gunshots could be heard in the background as an Israeli tank entered Rafah and ran over an I Love Gaza sign. After a unanimous decision by Israel's war cabinet, Israel Defense Forces have now started the long-awaited ground operations in eastern Rafah. And on Tuesday, the IDF took control of the Gaza side of the Rafah border crossing, through which aid is normally delivered to the territory. The IDF's ground operations on the Rafah border come just 2 days after terrorists reportedly fired mortars from that area, which resulted in the death of 4 Israeli soldiers.
This operation will continue until we eliminate Hamas in the Rafah area and in the entire Gaza Strip's area, or until the return of the first hostage.
And the mission also comes at the same time as ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Hamas. An Israeli delegation recently landed in Egypt to continue the negotiations, according to what the Israeli Prime Minister's office told the Times of Israel. Israel's prime minister gave an update on Tuesday.
We have already proven in the previous release of the abductees, military pressure on Hamas is a necessary condition for the return of our hostages. The Hamas proposal yesterday was intended to torpedo the entry of our forces into Rafah. It did not happen.
And a Hamas official on Tuesday said there will be no ceasefire deal if Israel continues with the military operation in Rafah. Meanwhile, thousands of residents in the Gaza Strip who relocated to Rafah for safety reasons are now heading back north after the IDF called on residents to evacuate certain areas in eastern Rafah.
We hope for a truce and a ceasefire, and we can return to our homes safe and sound.
Many have also been complaining about Israel blocking the Rafah border crossing, as it could hurt the humanitarian aid situation in Gaza. On Tuesday, aid trucks were seen lined up on the Egyptian side of the Rafah crossing. It remains unclear whether or when Israel will allow those aid trucks to enter Gaza, as the IDF recently opened a new humanitarian aid crossing point in northern Gaza. And in northern Israel on Monday, the Iran-backed Hezbollah terrorist group launched a drone attack from Lebanon, which the IDF said killed 2 Israeli soldiers. And on Tuesday, the IDF reported striking several terrorist targets in Lebanon. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The U.S. says Israel is not beginning the ground operation in Rafah, but dealing with terrorist use of the crossing. NTD's Jack Bradley has more from the State Department.
And so it is a legitimate goal to try to shut off and choke off that revenue stream to Hamas. That said, we want to see Rafah open, and so someone needs to be on the Gaza side of Rafah to run that side of the crossing.
U.S. officials describe Israel's seizure of the Rafah crossing as a limited rather than full-scale operation. And it's not the beginning of a ground offensive, something the U.S. says it wouldn't support.
The kind of military operation that would follow such an evacuation is one that we can support because of the dramatic impact it would have on the civilian population there and the ability to get humanitarian assistance in and deliver to those people.
Hamas responded to a ceasefire proposal by Egypt and Qatar on Monday with a counter-proposal which had amendments that were unacceptable to Israel, one of which was over whether the 33 hostages to be released in the first phase would be living or dead. Hamas said they could include dead bodies, while Israel demands living hostages. Israel has committed to reopen the Kerem Shalom border crossing on Wednesday. It was closed on Sunday after a Hamas rocket attack that killed 4 Israeli soldiers. CIA Director William Burns is in Cairo along with Israeli delegates talking about hostage negotiations and a ceasefire deal. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
President Biden doubling down on support for Israel and condemning anti-Semitism. That's despite his opposition to Israel's Rafah operation and political pressure from young voters. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has the story.
It's perhaps one of the strongest condemnations that President Biden has given to date regarding what he called a ferocious surge in anti-Semitism. Speaking at a Holocaust remembrance ceremony inside the Capitol, President Biden called out those who, he said, seem to have forgotten what happened on October 7th.
Over 1,200 innocent people, babies, parents, grandparents, slaughtered in their kibbutz, but just 7.5 months later, and people are already forgetting. They're already forgetting.
And to counter anti-Semitism on college campuses, the Biden administration on Tuesday sent out a letter to every college in the nation, giving them examples of anti-Semitism that could lead to federal investigations. And regarding college protests, President Biden again reiterating the right to free speech while also noting that some protesters have crossed the line. Watch.
To protest peacefully and make our voices heard. I understand that's America. But there is no place on any campus in America, any place in America, for anti-Semitism or hate speech or threats of violence of any kind.
And as an Israeli operation in Rafah looms, President Biden says his support for Israel remains ironclad,
even when we disagree.
Former President Trump, meanwhile, on Tuesday again blamed the protest on President Biden, saying the country is on fire.
There are protests all over the country. I've never seen anything like this. And we have a president that just refuses to talk because he can't talk.
And Biden's campaign says President Biden stands against anti-Semitism while Trump does not. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Colleges nationwide continue to deal with the fallout from pro-Palestinian protests. An encampment was cleared out of the University of Chicago today. Arrests and conflict continue as both students and individuals not affiliated with universities continue protesting. NTD's Fiona G brings us the latest.
Early this morning, police cleared an encampment from the University of Chicago. The group had reportedly been mostly peaceful, apart from small skirmishes last Friday with counter-protesters. No arrests were made. Protesters reportedly remain on campus in a standoff against university police. Protesters at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology were given a deadline to disperse by Monday afternoon or face suspension. Many ignored the ultimatum. Protesters broke past police barriers. Brief physical altercations ensued. Hundreds of high school students also joined. Protesters remain in the encampment today. More than 400 also protested outside the home of Harvard University's president Monday. At the University of California, Los Angeles, 43 protesters were arrested Monday. They will be charged with conspiracy to commit burglary. About 50 people also staged a sit-in in a UCLA building. The university has shifted to remote classes for the rest of the week. In New York City, a day of rage supporting Palestine kicked off in the streets Monday. Anti-Israel protesters gathered outside Hunter College. They then attempted to storm the star-studded Met Gala, but were blocked by police. Protesters then vandalized a World War I memorial in Central Park and burned American flags. Hunter College has now shifted to remote classes. This morning, protesters also picketed outside the residences of members of Columbia University's Board of Trustees. Worldwide, pro-Palestinian protests have now spread to Europe and into Asia, and have sparked debates over free speech rights. Fiona G, NTD News.
TikTok is suing the U.S. government. A law is forcing its Chinese parent company to sell the popular video app or face a ban on app stores in the U.S. TikTok and the parent company ByteDance is arguing that First Amendment free speech protections make the law unconstitutional. The bill was passed in a bipartisan effort by Washington lawmakers and signed into law by President Biden last month. It gives ByteDance until next January to sell the app or face the ban. Lawmakers say the data it gathers poses a national security risk, and the content is tailored to influence young Americans. Currently, more than 170 million Americans use the app. Two Ukrainian security officials allegedly planned to kill President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The two men were colonels in Ukraine's State Guard service. Ukraine says they leaked classified information to Moscow. Then the two were allegedly tasked with finding someone close to the presidential guard who would take Zelenskyy hostage and later kill him. One of them is also being charged with aiding in the preparation of a terrorist act. He reportedly received 2 drones and ammunition from Russia to transfer to an accomplice. The goal was to take out another high-ranking official in an explosion. Turning to Capitol Hill, lawmakers today investigating an apparent crisis of democracy in Brazil. This just weeks after Elon Musk defied alleged Brazilian court orders to censor conservative accounts. A Republican congressman said President Lula da Silva is copying censorship techniques from socialist regimes. NTD's Virginia Gibson has more.
Where we have Lula, who is a socialist, who is not abiding by the rule of law, is mirroring exactly what the Chinese Communist Party has done.
A few weeks ago, billionaire Elon Musk accused Brazil of making unlawful censorship demands. He said Brazilian Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes wanted X to ban sitting members of parliament, journalists, and others. This is part of the court's investigation into former conservative president Jair Bolsonaro. Musk at the time also said that his employees have been told that they will be arrested because he ignored the demands.
Why do you think that Twitter in particular has caused such an irritation?
I just think it's because Musk has got enough resources to be able to stand up to the Brazilian government. I mean, I think we're not naming the names here, but Google, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, these platforms are allowing the censorship to continue.
Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar said preserving democracy in Brazil is important to the U.S. That's because Brazil has by far the largest economy in South America and is an important partner. A Brazilian journalist at Tuesday's hearing gave an example of how Brazil's alleged censorship apparatus works.
My name is Paulo Figueiredo, and I am the living, breathing proof of human rights violations in Brazil. For doing the work of a good journalist, I am censored in all social media. I have my assets frozen and my Brazilian passport canceled, all without due process.
Democrats, meanwhile, mostly focused on former President Bolsonaro and his scandals. They said Congress should hold a hearing on that instead.
His refusal to acknowledge his 2022 election loss, his attempt to engineer a coup.
Brazil's Supreme Court previously threatened to block access to X in Brazil. So far, that has not happened. Video platform Rumble stopped operating in Brazil due to alleged censorship demands. Virginia Gibson, NTD News.
Russian authorities last week raided the homes of Falun Gong practitioners, a group heavily persecuted by the Chinese Communist regime. This comes amid Russia's closer relationship with Communist China. Earlier, I spoke with Ambassador Sam Brownback, co-chair of the International Religious Freedom Summit, about the persecution. Ambassador Brownback, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Well, my pleasure to join you.
Now, Russia has raided the homes of Falun Gong practitioners. This is following China's lead, where the spiritual practice is persecuted. How does this fit into the rising threats against religious freedom around the world by the Chinese regime?
Well, it's another piece of it. We saw this most dramatically recently in Nicaragua, where the Ortega regime had really let alone the Catholics and the evangelicals until they had built a stronger relationship with China. They had moved from recognizing Taiwan to China. And then not 6 months later, they started arresting Catholic priests, throwing the bishops in jail, kicking evangelical pastors out. And so this is the continuation of China's war on faith. And so now what you're seeing in Russia hasn't really messed all that much with the Falun Gong practitioners in the past. And all of a sudden you're seeing these raids taking place of peaceful people not doing anything but practicing Falun Gong practitioners. And now they get thrown in jail and harassed and harangued. And it's a reach. This is the reach of China further going forward in their war on faith.
Expanding on that, we are seeing Russia and China deepening their ties with this latest raid in Russia as one example among many since the war in Ukraine started. Now, given that, what typically happens to human rights and religious freedom within the countries when they align or work with the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, what happens is that you see these human rights diminished, dissipate, or be completely attacked. Remember just the complete dichotomy between the West and China on the issue of religious freedom. For us, this is a foundational, cornerstone human right. For China, it is an existential threat. They saw the Soviet Union fall in no small part because of religious people, because the Pope goes to Poland and says, "Be not afraid," and the Poles threw the communists out of Poland. And China is determined that this will not be repeated while they lead the communist world. And so this is just a continuation. For whatever reason, China loathes the Falun Gong. I mean, they're at war with all faiths, but Falun Gong gets the biggest action of their hatreds, the forced organ harvesting, the persecution, the extra national reach that they will go after Falun Gong. I don't understand the level of hatred that they have for Falun Gong, but it's palpable.
On that note, even here in the U.S., there are reports of the Chinese regime going after dissidents, Falun Gong practitioners, Uyghurs, all of these different types of faith. Now, what is the extent of the Chinese regime's transnational repression, and what's the best way for countries to stand up against that?
What's extensive? I shared with the example of Nicaragua. We're now seeing it more in Russia. Any country that's aligned with China in this axis of evil, and they're the lead country in the axis of evil, they're going to push their transnational agenda on them, and particularly in this area, going after the faith community, because they believe, I think, they believe that the faith community is one of the key groups or components that could actually take them down and cause them real trouble. And so they go after the faith community almost stronger than any place else. I mean, they started with the Tibetan Buddhists in China. They are after the Uyghurs, the Christians, and have been after very aggressively Falun Gong for a long period of time. I just think this is part and parcel of the axis of evil that becomes closer and closer knit together in its operations. And now you're going to see more and more of this religious persecution as part of the operational methods and means of the axis of evil directed by China.
And why do you think authoritarian regimes like Communist China fear faith so much?
They don't control it. If they controlled the faith community, like for instance in Russia, the Russian Orthodox Church is pretty well controlled. Now, at the top level, there are a number of practitioners in the Russian Orthodox Church who are deep people of faith, and they're not going along with this. But at the control level of the overall organization, they're very closely tied in with Vladimir Putin, and authoritarians are okay with faith as long as they control it. If they don't control it, they don't like it, they don't want it, they persecute it. And unfortunately now they have more technology and tools at their disposal than they've ever had before to be able to oppress these faiths of community, to be able to dig them out, find them, and lock them up or oppress them or put them in virtual police states, as we see in Xinjiang, where you have Muslims that are just watched everywhere, and the ones that they really don't like, they put in concentration camps.
And Ambassador, World Falun Dafa Day is coming up. It's been nearly a quarter century since the Falun Gong has been persecuted inside China. Now, despite that, it's still flourishing around the world. What do you see as the enduring aspects of faith, despite being in the face of, say, brutal persecution like in China?
We've seen this play throughout the history of mankind, the kingdom of man oppressing the kingdom of the spiritual, the kingdom of God. And the kingdom of man will never win in this fight. There'll be times they will gain the upper hand. They'll be able to oppress people, but ultimately they will never be able to subdue the human spirit. It will not happen. They can do a lot of things to make it hard. They can drive a number of people away, but ultimately they will not subdue the human spirit.
Ambassador Brownback, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Joining me now to discuss TikTok's lawsuit is Jimmy Quinn, national security correspondent at National Review. Jimmy, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you again. To begin, TikTok and its Chinese parent company ByteDance are suing the U.S. government over the bill calling for its divestment. Now, what stood out to you about the lawsuit?
Well, it's great to be with you. What we're seeing is a lot of whining and even more distortions from TikTok. They've recycled some of the talking points that they've used in the past. At the core of this issue, TikTok is trying to claim that it has a constitutional right to operate in the United States of America. But the best way to look at this company is it is the U.S. subsidiary of ByteDance, a company that is closely linked to China's military civil fusion programs. ByteDance has worked with Sugon, which is a company that helps the PLA test hypersonic weapons and does simulations for that. So to go out and say that TikTok has a First Amendment right or it can claim protections under the Fifth Amendment is pretty amusing, frankly. But they say that there's a lot of speculation about the app in this petition that they just filed today. But the fact of the matter is that you have the former director of the National Security Agency saying that TikTok is a gun pointed at the head of our country. If that isn't convincing, I don't know what is. But the intelligence community is pretty clear on this, and they know that ByteDance has been blacklisting opponents of the CCP from all of their apps, including TikTok. This is very concerning, and the petition doesn't even begin to address these issues.
You mentioned the PLA, or People's Liberation Army, which is China's military. Now, given that TikTok itself says the Chinese regime has made clear that it won't permit a divestment of ByteDance's algorithm, what national security concerns does this raise?
TikTok's lobbyists on Capitol Hill have spent the previous 3 to 4 years arguing that their company is not beholden to the Chinese government. But here you have this court filing submitted today in which they say that they cannot divest, or ByteDance can't divest itself of TikTok because the Chinese government won't allow it to do so. I mean, it's just the height of irony. And it really undercuts everything that TikTok's talking heads have been saying for the past several years. So that should really concern every American. If the Chinese government is able to exercise control over what ByteDance is able to do in terms of selling its various apps, what else can the Chinese Communist Party force ByteDance to do? We have no evidence to suggest that ByteDance wouldn't comply with China's national intelligence law, which would require it to share information about its US users. And there's evidence that ByteDance has actually spied on American journalists using their location data through TikTok. So the same could be done to journalists, politicians, and other prominent Americans. And the lawsuit doesn't even begin to address these issues and to address concerns about this.
And Jimmy, expanding on that, China doesn't even allow TikTok within its own country. They have a different version called Douyin. What's so special about the algorithm that the Chinese regime wouldn't want to divest?
The algorithm is controlled from ByteDance's headquarters in Beijing. So there's a lot of conversation about this Project Texas initiative where TikTok claims that it can wall off user data and basically isolate all of this from Chinese interference. But that really is not going to work like that. I mean, if the argument is that it's impossible to divest TikTok and separate it from ByteDance, but at the same time, you're claiming that this algorithm, is so integral to how TikTok works and it can only, be dealt with in China. There's an inconsistency there. And that's why Congress went ahead and passed this legislation to ensure that Americans are protected from the threat of the Chinese Communist Party controlling this massive publishing platform. TikTok calls itself a publishing platform in the lawsuit. And it really begs asking, just how they're using that, how they're making editorial decisions to promote certain content that might be favorable to the CCP or unfavorable to America. So I think that all of this raises a lot of new questions. And even just in the legal filing we saw today, it's the start of a new conversation that all Americans and their elected representatives should be taking part in.
And all of this does come as a former TikTok executive is actually suing the platform Monday, alleging that the Chinese parent company ByteDance has a lot more control over the platform than it claimed. You've covered TikTok quite extensively. Give us some more examples of the inconsistencies with what TikTok has said.
TikTok has, on numerous occasions, said things that simply aren't true. So to go back to the example of when ByteDance spied on American journalists using TikTok, the company denied it. They went after Forbes, and which reported this out initially, and they said that Forbes wasn't reporting with integrity, But then eventually ByteDance was forced to admit the truth. They've lied about that. They've also lied about where U.S. user data is stored. There are inconsistencies in terms of the access that engineers and other staffers at ByteDance headquarters in Beijing, the sort of data that they have access to. So we've seen TikTok lie again and again, and unfortunately, this new legal filing contains a number of other inaccuracies that everyone should be looking at with a significant degree of skepticism.
Jimmy Quinn, national security correspondent at the National Review, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
House Speaker Mike Johnson calls for all cases against Trump to be dropped. Johnson is also rejecting allegations that he was negotiating with Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene to fend off her motion to oust him as Speaker. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has the details.
During this Tuesday weekly House Republican press conference, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson called the criminal cases against President Donald Trump a, quote, borderline criminal conspiracy. Speaker Mike Johnson also highlighted how the weaponization of the justice system is the main threat to the American Republic.
Lawfare. They're using our judicial system to go after political opponents. The most obvious example of that, and I think the most egregious one in history, is what is being done to Donald Trump right now. And these cases are a coordinated political attack. Plain and simple, they are a clear attempt to keep Donald Trump in the courtroom and off the campaign trail. That's what this is. It's an election interference. It is borderline criminal conspiracy.
Congressman Pete Aguilar, the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, argued on Tuesday that Speaker Johnson's emphasis on Donald Trump's legal woes has something to do with his private meetings with Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene.
You know, he was just here at this podium, very animated in talking about some topics that had not been front of mind in the past, namely the president's investigations, the former president being investigated. So I'm sure that's part of the mix of what Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to see out of her speaker.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson rejected allegations that he was negotiating with Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene in order to fend off a motion to vacate the speakership. Instead, the speaker insisted that meeting with House Republican members is part of his leadership style. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
For the first time in decades, San Diego County, California has emerged as the primary region along the southern border for encounters with illegal immigrants. NTD's Christina Corona spoke with the mayor of El Cajon for his thoughts.
San Diego County has now surpassed all other areas in border encounters for the first time in 25 years. In April alone, there were 37,370 encounters, surpassing Tucson with 31,240, El Paso with 30,410, and Del Rio with 10,275. El Cajon Mayor Bill Wells discusses why he believes San Diego leads in border encounters.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that California is a sanctuary state and that we welcome immigrants and illegal aliens with open arms. We don't ask a lot of questions and we don't do any kind of enforcement here at all.
He says Texas toughens their stance on illegal immigration using razor wire and tactics to deter entry.
I think the cartels who really run the whole show here, they're looking for the path of least resistance, and they're choosing California.
He adds since October 1st, the San Diego sector has witnessed a total of 214,855 apprehensions, highlighting a significant challenge the region faces. Since September, over 140,000 individuals have been released into the streets of San Diego County. With hundreds of thousands of people, Mayor Wells states it's not what he expected.
What we didn't quite understand was that the NGOs that are making billions of dollars off of this process, they've been pretty efficient at getting people off the buses and then over to the airport or down to the Greyhound station to be shipped off to other parts of the country. I think that's part of the Biden administration's goal, is to make this not as noticeable by sending them off to the blue state areas.
Recently, Mayor Wells witnessed firsthand dozens of Chinese nationals on a remote dirt road, waiting for Border Patrol to process them. He also observed dozens of ripped-up passports, indicating attempts by illegal immigrants to conceal their identity. Mayor Wells expressed that the federal government has failed in its duty to secure our borders.
They've made a decision that they're going to increase immigration from foreign nationals by 10 to 15%, or I'm sorry, 10 to 15 times what it has been in the past. This is unprecedented in American history, usually unprecedented in world history. Countries just don't open up their borders to anybody who wants to come in. There's usually some kind of a decision-making process.
Mayor Wells, who is currently running for Congress in San Diego, emphasizes the need for GOP control of the House, Senate, and White House to address the border crisis. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Education Secretary Miguel Cardona coming under fire on Capitol Hill today. That's over his handling of rising anti-Israel sentiment on college campuses and the massive delay in this year's financial aid applications. NTD's Sam Wong has the details.
On Tuesday, Education Secretary Miguel Cardona testified before the House Committee on Education and the Workforce. As anti-Israel unrest continues to take over America's universities, some lawmakers are calling on Cardona to step down.
From the beginning, I've urged a firm hand in dealing with the explosion of anti-Semitism on campus. With the outbreak of campus riots, I'm only more resolute, so I will say it again. You must resign.
Republicans have long voiced concern over the Biden administration's student loan forgiveness policies. Some say it's forcing people without college degrees to cover tuition costs for others. Lawmakers also question whether pro-Palestine student agitators should go to school for free at the expense of U.S. taxpayers.
Do you think we should continue to make student loans when you and the administration are trying to transfer all the debt to the taxpayers with the latest scheme that's been estimated to be going to cost maybe even $750 billion?
This year, college-bound students in the U.S. are seeing an unprecedented delay in their financial aid applications. The issue stems from a slow rollout in the new FAFSA form, which students must fill out to qualify for loans and grants. The overhaul is designed to expedite and simplify the process, but it was delayed even further as millions of forms were found to have errors.
We're hovering around 60% completion rate before the simplification.
Mr. Secretary,
rolling out the plan has been a challenge, and
Mr. Secretary,
yes.
It's 100% in my district. No student can complete the FAFSA application. Could I please have your commitment that this will be resolved before the next school year?
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's it.
Most American colleges require students to decide by May 1st on whether they're enrolling in the fall semester. But the FAFSA holdup has prompted many students to either change plans or pay their tuition in full. According to the Education Department, roughly 4.7 million families applied for federal financial aid by late February. That's nearly a 40% drop compared to the previous year. The top Education Department official overseeing college financial aid has already announced he would step down in June. Sam Wong, NTD News.
And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin at the Sports Hub. Dave, plenty to discuss today, but let's start in soccer memorabilia, where the Golden Ball trophy awarded to the late Diego Maradona back in 1986 is up for auction. Now, this trophy was believed to be stolen at one point. How did it end up at an auction house in France?
You know, that's still partly a mystery. Now, this trophy is given to the MVP of the World Cup. Argentina won the World Cup back in 1986, largely due to the heroics of Maradona, so he was awarded the trophy, but soon after, its whereabouts became unknown. There were a lot of rumors as to how it left his possession, such as being stolen, but whatever the case, it was no longer believed to be in his possession just a couple years later. Now, fast forward all the way to 2016, an anonymous dealer bought it among a group of trophies at an auction house. He had no idea what he had, though, but after a very long verification process, they found it was actually the real deal. Now, Maradona's jersey from that World Cup sold for $9 million recently, so they're thinking this is going to go somewhere in the millions. The bidding starts on June 6th.
Looking at NFL news, Cincinnati quarterback Joe Burrow is throwing again after missing the final 7 games of last season. Is it fair to say that their chances of getting back to the Super Bowl hinge on his health?
Yeah, I would say so, although Jake Browning did a very good job in his absence last year. But Joe Burrow is the highest paid player in the league for a reason. His performance in the playoffs, especially the last couple of years, has been very special. I mean, his Bengals are the last team to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs, and he was probably the biggest reason why. Now, Burrow's only issue is his injury history. He missed half of his rookie season in 2020 after tearing up his knee. 2 years ago, he missed pretty much all of training camp with an appendicitis. Last year, he missed almost all of training camp, again, this time with a calf injury. They did get him ready for week 1, although he looked somewhat limited last year. But I think it's well understood around the league. If he's healthy, Cincinnati is a very tough out, especially in the playoffs.
Shifting gears now to the NBA, the league's MVP award will be announced tomorrow night. Would you say Denver's Nikola Jokic is the favorite?
Yeah, but I think it'll actually be somewhat close, actually. Now, let's take a look at Nikola Jokic's case. Here is his season stats from this year. As you can see, he averaged 26.5 points per game. That was good for 10th in the league. His rebounds at 12.5, that was good for number 4. And assists per game, 9 assists per game. That was good for 3rd in the league. Very rare for a guy 6'11", 280 pounds to be this great of a passer, but he is. Led Denver to the NBA title last year, and he led his team to 57 wins on the season, second best record in the league. But I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of Oklahoma City is at least going to give him a run for his money. As you can see here, he averaged 30 points a game. That was good for 3rd in the league. And he also led Oklahoma City to a 57-25 record, tied for the second best record in the league. But I think it is going to go to Nikola Jokic, and that is going to put him into some very select company, as you can see here. Now, here are the tiers of most MVP awards won all time. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with 6. He is in the top tier. Nobody else has that many. Even Michael Jordan, him and Bill Russell both have 5 in the next tier. LeBron James and Wilt Chamberlain each have 4. Then you've got a trio of guys, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Moses Malone each have 3. Now look at Nikola Jokic here in the 5th tier, tied with 6 other players with 2. If he wins tomorrow night, boy, he joins some very select company right here. These, of course, are all Hall of Famers that Nikola Jokic is soon probably going to join.
Now, his Denver squad is in some trouble, though, down 2-0 already, but they're off tonight, and instead we have a couple of game ones. Whom do you like in tonight's action?
Yeah, here is the playoff brackets for tonight. Boston versus Cleveland, game 1 tonight, like you mentioned, and the Thunder versus the Mavs, game 1 tonight. Now, in this series, I'd like Boston to advance. I mean, I think most everybody does. They won 64 games. That was the most in the regular season. But they are going to be without center Kristaps Porzingis. Now, he is listed as out with a calf injury. He could return this series. It looks kind of doubtful. Whatever the case, Boston is now going to have to turn to 37-year-old Al Horford. And that's going to be tough because Cleveland has a very tall front line. They start 7-footers Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. So it's going to be a little bit difficult for them, I think. But I still think Boston's going to take them. Now, in the Dallas-Oklahoma City series, I think this is going to be a lot closer, actually. But I think it's going to hinge a lot on the health of Luka Doncic. Now, he hurt his knee in round 1. He didn't quite look 100% here, and he was actually a finalist for the MVP award. He's listed as questionable for tonight, but he and Kyrie Irving are really 2 good playoff performers. If those 2 are good and healthy, I think they may pull the upset over Oklahoma City and advance to the conference finals.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news for round-the-clock coverage. Visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.